I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
And I'm Edison. Y'all better grab your extra large popcorn. We are in the thick of things with great films.
I am open and positive.
I don't like it.
Let's throw on these boxer gloves.
Let's do it.
Let's fucking do it.
Welcome to Talk Movie to Me, a weekly podcast where we do a deep dive on a new release that's just hit theaters or streaming. I'm Helen.
I'm Edison.
And I'm Miss Sinclair, and this week we are doing a very special double feature episode. There's just so many movies right now.
So many.
Can't complain about that. So we are doubling up today. Grab your extra large popcorn. Edison, why don't you introduce the first film?
Sure. First is a tale so sticky and sweet about a lad who makes chocolate treats.
Oh.
Maybe you saw it on your holiday, starring our favorite Chalamet.
Oh, good.
Don't dance, Helen. Don't dance.
Of course, we speak of the movie Wonka, the best film made since Casablanca. What? Why'd you laugh? Did I say something droll? Or are you just being a quarrelsome troll? Anyway, the chocolates, put them in me, and I'll feel joyful watching singing to me. Helen, I bet you had a marvelous time. The dancing colors truly sublime. Sinclair's riled up by the casting of Hugh as an Oompa Loompa Doompa-Dee-Doo. I suspect it's because she's just like him. Cranky, can't take a risk, ornery-some. Okay, even I've grown tired of this song. 3 lines in, it was already too long. Every good thing started with a dream, and mine is dark chocolate filled with heavenly cream.
Wow. Wow, Edison. I mean, I will give you a clap for that. Not for the movie, but for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, if y'all are still with us, of course I can only be introing one film, and that is Wonka. This is the latest iteration of the classic Roald Dahl story about Willy Wonka, the famous chocolatier, famously brought to life in 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which starred Gene Wilder as a titular character, and then again in 2005's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, starring Johnny Depp. This time, the film stars everyone's favorite young movie star, Timothée Chalamet, as Willy Wonka, and is written and directed by Paul King, who previously had a huge success with his heartwarming, family-friendly Paddington films. The story focuses on a younger Willy Wonka who has to outwit a cabal of greedy chocolatiers in order to bring to fruition his dream of opening a chocolate shop. Also starring are Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa and Olivia Colman as Mrs. Scrubbit, a scheming guest house owner who tricks Wonka into indentured servitude. Wonka asks the question, how many licks does it take till you get to the center of the... Oh, wait. Wrong song. Story. First thoughts, Helen.
Well, okay, so I saw this before Christmas because initially we were going to do this before Christmas and then our schedule got a bit bungled. But like you, Edison, I was having a bit of a hard time remembering how this started. You had asked this in our group text. But I do remember going to the theater and going to a matinee and feeling just like very pleasant, actually, that I was going to see this film. And it was number 4 on my most anticipated for 2023 as we recapped last week. So, going into it, I was kind of like, okay, let's see what we got. Yeah, feeling cautiously optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Sinclair?
Okay, first of all, 2 things.
There we go.
1, I said, and with authority, I said there is no way we are doing a double feature and putting Poor Things in the same episode as Wonka.
You did say that.
But alas, here we are.
I actually think they're
we
kind
are.
of interesting companion pieces.
Yes.
2, I am not going to sit here and let you 2 turn me into a villain.
Honey,
In this
the ship
episode
has sailed.
at all. I don't want to hear.
And singing Glorious Timmy was atop the mast.
I don't want to hear, oh, Sinclair, you don't like joy, you don't like magic. That's not what this is at all.
That's
Full
always what it is.
disclosure. Not what this is. So I am not gonna let you turn me into the freaking Miss Scribbage of the episode. Miss Scrubbage. Okay.
All right.
Okay, look, obviously I have not been Team Wonka since this movie was announced. I've never been on board with this, that I haven't kept that a secret at all. Though I do need to say that I did love the Paddington movies. I thought those were really sweet. They were really well done. In terms of when this movie first started, and I also need to say I was the only one who could remember how this movie even started.
You do just have a better memory, though.
That is true. That's true. But when this first starts, we do see little Timmy. He's up on the sails. He's singing his little heart out. And he does have a pleasant voice.
Yeah.
Which I was a little bit surprised at. I didn't actually realize how much singing he would be doing in this movie. But, with him up on those sails, you do get a sense of the tone of this movie right away. Mm-hmm. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what this is going to be. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, we'll stay tuned.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so that's right. So the movie is opening with Timmy up on the mast, and he's singing, "Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination." And 100%. His voice is really warm, actually. And of course, his smile is beaming. The delivery is lovely. I was fully in the mood for this. I went to see this over the holidays with a bunch of my cousins. It was also a matinee. I think on Boxing Day. And just was like good vibes. And I knew from the beginning that this was not going to be like a subversive take. We kind of knew that going into it anyway. This is just going to be, good and like heartwarming. And you can tell from that opening. And I was so here for it, in the right mood for this movie. Mm-hmm. So why don't we get right into storytelling?
Storytelling. You know what? I found this movie to be quite delightful.
Yes. Me too, Helen. I loved it.
I wasn't necessarily expecting that, but like I was like really entertained the whole time, and I was like, this is really sweet. It's not that the story is necessarily that inventive or anything, but I don't know. There was something about it that kept me hooked in. I found it to be pretty funny at times. The musical aspect of it is kind of forgettable. I think that the only song that really stuck with me is Pure Imagination, but that's actually from the original movie, so that doesn't really count. I forgot it was a musical immediately after and before too, to be honest. I went into it being like, oh yeah, this is a musical. In
a way, I think that could be complimentary. Like maybe the songs themselves weren't memorable necessarily. But it sometimes when it's a musical can be so distracting. And it's was so seamlessly folded into the way that this film was told.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had one major issue that we'll get into in a little bit, but I don't know. Timmy as this character, which I found to be almost very Mary Poppins-esque, like with his
he
pulling
just
stuff
in,
out of
like,
his
out of
his
like
bag.
She comes in flying, with her umbrella, and he comes in magically just up on these sails.
He has a collection of things with him in his little suitcase and his hat, and there was something really playful and magical about that I just thought was really sweet. Yeah, I don't know, Eddie.
So looking at it from a storytelling perspective, I was trying to, it has, to be honest, been a while since I have seen the other films. I'm sure I only saw the Tim Burton one maybe once or twice way back,
I think I only
when
saw
it came
once.
out. And I haven't seen the original in years. So I do remember them being a lot darker. But I appreciated that this was sort of a Wonka origin story. It's like this is a younger Willy Wonka before he has been jaded by, the world around him, while he's still idealistic and driven by his dreams and his emotional core, and he just wants to bring and share his passion with the world. And I really appreciated that. I thought Timmy was the right one for that. I can see how in this world, and it's like this is the very beginning of capitalism or whatever, but it's like you could see these other three, the like mafia chocolatiers, like this is what happens after you've been doing it for a long time, when you're just in business for so long, and it just can't help but eat away at your soul. And maybe we see a little bit more of that Wonka in those earlier films. But I appreciated the origin story of Wonka. What did you think, Sinclair?
I mean, I don't think in any world this character, this particular Willy Wonka, ends up being jaded in any way. Like, I don't believe that at all. That you have to look at this movie as two separate things, because I think in no world does this Timmy character become the Gene Wilder character.
I hope so.
In any way. And yeah, you can hope that, and that's fine. I just think that this is definitely its own thing. And for me, I have to separate those two things, because it's just not believable for me if I look at it in that way. I understand that you two were delighted by this, and I think that's fair. I actually do think that's fair. I think it's fair that you were in the mood for it. I think it's fair that you went with family members on a matinee, and I think that
I went alone. But
you went alone. That's fine. But I think that the purpose of this movie is that. Do I think this is fundamentally a good movie? No. Do I think that you can gather that nice afternoon from it? Yes. Okay. My biggest problem with this movie is that I thought it was generic, played it too safe, and I was overall bored.
Bored?
And I was bored. I was bored watching it, and I also didn't think the music was memorable, and I didn't find it funny. Yeah. And you know, maybe you can say I don't like joy, I don't like magic. However, my mood has been quite great. I will say I've been in my cuckles have been warmed over the holiday season. So I don't think it was that. I just think fundamentally, as a whole, I didn't think this was an interesting movie in any way, but serves the purpose that you two are talking about. And for me, a Roald Dahl story, the fun of those stories is the darkness.
Yeah, I agree.
And what makes adaptations of his work interesting is channeling that and using that to make an interesting kids film. This played it way too safe for me. It didn't lean into anything. And I think overall that's why I was just a bit bored by it.
I actually don't really disagree with you. And that is something that I do love as well about Roald Dahl, is the darkness. It's my favorite part. I think that I had already reconciled that in this movie, because when I initially heard about it, I was so excited because of, you know, thinking of Timmy in sort of a dark Wonka origin story role. And then when I realized it was not going to be that, I like reset my expectations and was able to go in and be like, oh, it was sweet, you know? But I don't disagree with you. I think that, yeah, there is pretty much zero darkness to this film other than the fat suit. We'll get into that. But but for what it was, which I found, you know, it was a family movie, it entertained me and I chuckled.
Yeah, I think that's
you warmed your cuckles.
Warmed those cuckles.
Also, what is a cuckle? What
I don't
is
know.
That? Like, I was sitting there. I was like, what actually is a cuckle?
I mean,
is it like the cuckles of your heart?
Just
like
be careful not to say cuckold.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, cuckle.
Okay, what is a cockle? It's actually a cuckle. A cuckle is a corrupt dialectical form of cockle.
Okay.
Cockle.
Okay, those need to be warmed
dangerous.
for sure.
And a cockle is
I think it's like the depth
a
of
kind.
your
No,
heart
it's
or
a
something?
kind of a kiln or stove for drying hops.
Lol.
It's the body of a fire chamber of an air stove, usually made of brick. So it's a stove.
Oh, okay.
So it warmed the cockle.
It always just sounds like people are saying for the person to warm themselves in some way. Not
it's like their inner oven.
Yeah, not to like warm a kitchen appliance.
Well, I'm so glad that we clarified that for all of our listeners. Well, we have to,
because they say it about 10 times in this movie as a character trait.
Listen, Sinclair, I actually don't disagree with you on the point of, taking away the best from Roald Dahl, your favorite types of interpretations of that, the way that you kind of introduce the dark twistedness to these kids' stories. Totally. This film isn't that. But that's fine. I think it's about expectations, as you say, Helen, going into it. Like, this is a family movie. It's a family-friendly movie.
But so was the original. Like, so was the Gene Wilder one, too.
That's true. And
so was Never-Ending Story. And so was, all these movies from our past.
Yeah, but we were a different kind of child.
Yeah.
Bring it back, man. Bring it back. Bring back terrifying kids.
I think it was okay for this to be sweet and wholesome and whimsical and not too dark. I mean, he is still literally captured and put into indentured servitude. His mother is dead. He has to reckon that. He's going to fight a cabal of like controlling gay-coded villains. There's still some darkness here.
Yep.
Let's talk about my big issue. Keegan-Michael Key is a police officer who's being bribed by the chocolate cartel to run Timmy out of town, and he's being bribed with chocolate as though it is heroin. And he is a fiend for this chocolate, and he eats so much chocolate that he gains an enormous amount of weight in the span of like a week. And he just keeps getting bigger and bigger fat suits in this movie. I'm sorry. Are we not done with fat suits? That's not funny. That is not a funny joke. Like when I saw that happen in this movie, I was like, oh my God. Who approved this? Like I was shocked.
It's an element that is, it's an interesting choice because that character, not necessarily the cop, but like the person in this film who eats all the chocolate and gets fat is part of all of the other previous iterations of this movie too. I don't know why they chose to keep it though.
Yeah, weird. Weird choice.
I thought the jokes were completely bizarre in this movie. There were certain jokes in this where the theater was laughing and I couldn't believe it. The fat suit, I was like, wow, okay. But also every time the character heard the evil cartel guy, whenever he heard poor and he gagged, and I was like, are we doing this?
Funny.
Are we doing this? I thought this like the laziest joke writing. We saw that in Knives Out, and when the character like gags and vomits. I was like, can we? In what world? In this world,
this is a different world.
Comical?
Also, remember the chocolate is magical chocolate. It also impacts people. It allows them to levitate when they eat it.
Only Willy Wonka's chocolate's magical. Not the other guys.
This is another thing I need to touch on.
And just wait. And I like the funny bits, like the that party night out chocolate that they give the security guy who goes through the whole ringer of like being fun and then dancing and the security and then calling the person his like past love. And I like that storyline kind of got a nice wrap up too. I hear you read the fat suit. I will be honest, I did not clock that while watching it.
That's shocking to me.
It's because it's so ingrained to just see that in movies. I mean, even now,
It didn't even, until you said it after. I actually only had one gripe with this film, which is funny because I thought it was the one that we all share because it was so obvious to me. But that was that all of these three villains were just so clearly gay coded. And I was like, can we not get over the gay villain trope? That was my only issue. And nobody else even seemed to notice that. So I think it's just one of those things where it's like we clock, I don't know, the things that we pay attention to.
So obviously these characters have been done before in film. The Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the Gene Wilder character is like very iconic. Johnny Depp has also done his iteration of this as well. And an issue that I have with this film compared to the Gene Wilder character is I honestly was like, is he supposed to be a wizard?
Oh, like the magic of it all.
Yeah, the magic irritated me because and I just said I'm not going to let you say that I hate magic. And
you're the only one saying it.
Okay, so the magic irritated me, but I'll explain why. I was really wondering, is he supposed to be a wizard? Because that's the only way this is believable at all. There was nothing grounded in any sort of like real possibility, where the Gene Wilder, I prefer that performance more because he is more of a mad scientist and his intentions don't necessarily feel like he's just there to make chocolate. There's an eccentricity to him where you don't really know why he's doing these experiments. Part of you feels like he may be a con man, and there's an excitement to that. Things just appeared out of nowhere in this Wonka, where when you watch the Gene Wilder
appeared out of his magical hat.
When you watch the Gene Wilder film, his chocolate room, it functions like an ecosystem, which is super interesting and fascinating. And you actually believe that somebody could build something like that. And it's a lot more grounded in reality. And I just think it's smarter. It's smarter to have the specifics of, I've created this thing. It functions with science. It functions with an ecosystem. And it's a lot smarter than having something just appear out of nowhere. Wonka's Chocolate Factory at the end of this movie, how? Everything just suddenly would appear.
This is a world of pure imagination. This is a different world, Sinclair. You can't keep comparing it to the original Wonka film.
I think it's a lazy world. I think it's a lazy way to tell a story.
I think it's a magical way.
Just have these things appear. There's no specifics to it to make it interesting.
But the specifics were his magical chocolate that captured storms and lightning and thunderbolt, that had little flying bugs. There was an element of magic. The island was magic. There's a fucking Oompa Loompa. It's like,
no, but I'm saying that what makes Wonka interesting to me is, I don't want to say the science of it all, but I think the specifics of it all, being able to actually build something, and you watching it and looking at like a scientist. I didn't want to see a wizard. I didn't want to see a wizard just pull things out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's fair. We haven't spoken of the Oompa Loompa. I think that we've touched on Timmy's performance. So why don't we just get into the performance of Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa?
Yes.
Right.
Not enough. Okay. We needed more Oompa Loompa in this film.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but we needed more Oompa Loompa.
Yeah. Because I could have watched Hugh Grant, Oompa Loompa, and Timothée Chalamet try and act with each other all day. It was fucking hilarious.
I thought it was so funny. Sinclair, you were so against this casting.
I'm still against it. I need to be clear that I am still against it. I was so bored with this movie. I was praying for Hugh Grant to come on as an Oompa Loompa. I was praying for it, and he does it for so long.
I know. It takes a long time for him to
I was like, at least I'm going to get to see grumpy, cranky, creepy Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa to spice this movie up a little bit.
And he was even more than that. It was the way that he also played him as like aloof and imperious and like righteous and
as himself, basically.
Yeah, it was just so good. Like this era of like Hugh Grant is a cranky shit, but like in these characters is perfect. And that I like that dynamic even carried forth. Like we saw that interview, right, where Timmy was planted in the audience on one of the talk shows. It was so funny.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed that. I would take a standalone Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa film if somebody wants to make that.
What happens when he goes back to that magical island?
Yeah. And also just to hear him in all of the interviews just talk about how much he hates it. I think it's hilarious. Like, he doesn't hold back at all. He's just like, yeah, I'm doing this because I have a lot of kids and I need the money and I'm old. And so this is the era of my career that I'm in. Sorry.
Perfect. Might as well be honest about it.
It's so funny.
I also want to say, even though it was a very small role, just seeing Sally Hawkins on screen, like, I just have such warmth and affection for her. She's the perfect, like, mom character in this film or whatever. In anything, she just pulls at my, like, heartstrings immediately. Maybe it's from seeing her in Maude or the Shape of Water. I don't know what, but in every role she just has this, like, emotionality that I just love her. So I loved seeing her.
I also love Sally Hawkins. However, I felt that using her was emotionally manipulative in this movie. She's almost treated like
Jesus.
just like a prop to put in for you to know that now's your time to get emotional because you see Sally Hawkins. And that's how I felt when I saw it. I was like, you're just going to plop her in here to bring out some tears.
Yeah, and it worked.
It worked.
Of course it worked.
I had a
it's
little
by
tear
design,
at the end.
Edison. It's by design.
Yes, I am aware of that, and I love it. I will say the last thing about performance about Timmy, I just love, so the gays are calling him Twonka for Twink Wonka, which is just killing me.
Yeah, he's passable in this. He's okay. I think that there's more interesting things for him to do, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But what do we think about this as a choice, though? Like, I think as a career choice, when this was first announced, I thought, we all did when we were talking about it, had to be kind of subversive and dark. Like, it was going to be an interesting choice that way in terms of the performance itself. And it isn't. It doesn't go there. It's much less of that. But I do think it's an interesting choice for Timothée at this point in his career to take on a role like this that's in a kid's film. Like, it's a huge box office hit. It's made almost $500 million, and I'm sure that influenced this decision, knowing that it would reach a whole new audience and, make him a bigger star even than he already is. But it's a fun choice. What do you think?
I'm going to be a cynical Sinclair on this one and say he did it to become more famous and to make a lot of money. And I don't really think this was a creative choice at all. He has become very famous from this movie. Like, think about him last year in Creepy Cannibal and Bones and all. We don't see him doing a meet and greet at Yorkdale Mall for Bones and all, but
I love that you said meet and greet.
Totally. I think absolutely. But I think that's smart from a career perspective. 100%. This made him, we all know him. Everybody on the internet in that way tapped in, knew him, and knows he's famous and whatever. But, like, kids and parents now know that he's famous too.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the last word on Wonka?
I found this to be sweet. I was viewing it as its own standalone piece. When you compare it to the 1971 film, they're completely different things. The 1971 film is better, 100%. The character is better in that movie. But looking at this as its own entity, I found it entertaining, and I would love more Hugh Grant Oompa Loompa, please, and thank you. Sinclair, your last word?
Last words for me. Let's bring back kids' movies that are traumatizing as fuck. I'm sorry. Bring it back. Bring back the weird. Bring back practical sets. We didn't even say anything technical about this movie. I know. Why bother? It was all CGI.
Yeah.
My hope is that Hugh Grant, as the Oompa Loompa, haunts the dreams of children for years to come. I think that children's movies became iconic because they took risks. They dared to challenge the thoughts of children. They dared to be weird and unique and at times scary. And that's what makes them memorable in so many ways. The musical numbers are forgettable in this. They had to rehash the amazing songs from the 70s films because the songs in this are forgettable, so they had to rehash those songs. This was a real snoozer.
Was
Your
the last word, not the last novella?
Your wallets will get milked more than Abigail the giraffe does in this film.
God. Okay. That was it. It was waiting for that line. Okay, well, the last word for me is that I absolutely love this movie. I thought it was family-friendly fun. I thought it was wholesome and lovely and sweet. And I think pretty much everybody who is not deeply cynical or critical will enjoy or find
people that are not at all critical
will find something to love in this movie. Yay.
Take where your mind is at with Wonka, whimsical London adjacent early 1900s, and just shifted a bit to another form of London in the early 1900s, except instead of inventive chocolates, we've got inventive animals. So think head of a pig stitched on the body of a chicken. And you're right where you need to be for Poor Things, directed by Greek visionary Yorgos Lanthimos. In Poor Things, Willem Dafoe plays Dr. Godwin Baxter, a scientist/surgeon who has brought Bella Baxter into the world. Bella, played by Emma Stone, has the body of a woman and the brain of an infant. She is learning how to talk, move, eat, exist in the world. Godwin's protege, Max McCandles, played by Rami Youssef, is brought on to study Bella and quickly falls in love with her unusual, charming perspective. But before the two can be betrothed, Bella must adventure out on her own and experience some furious jumping with the smarmy Duncan Wedderburn, played by Mark Ruffalo. What ensues is pure imagination. Poor Things asks the question, if ignorance is bliss, then is knowledge despair? Or is there a way to learn about the world and still want to live in it? First impression, Edison.
That is a great question, Helen. Yes, I love that.
Thanks.
So, yeah, this film opens with the drama right off the bat. The musical score is crazy. The colors are super saturated. We see this woman standing on a bridge or ledge or something. The sky is black and gray. It's stormy. This gown she's wearing is like blue, the most blue. We see it's Emma Stone with the eyebrows, and then and then she jumps, and then the film is in black and white, and I was like, what? Yeah, we were all so excited for this film. The anticipation for this film, for these two to be collaborating, knowing that it was going to be good, was real high. So I was going into this admittedly with quite high expectations and trying to temper them in advance, but not at all successful at doing that. But
Sorry.
Yeah, I was really like brought into this world immediately. What about you, Sinclair?
I have been waiting for this movie forever.
For years.
Okay. This was on my anticipated list like 2 years ago. It's taken so long to come out. I needed this movie. I needed this. After, Wonka and a lot of other movies, I needed dark. I needed twisted and daring and absurd. And when this movie started, I thought, oh, I feel so much better. I loved the
It was
fact
like a breath of fresh air.
It was just a breath of fresh air. Everything was so bizarre. It was topsy-turvy. You have no idea really where this is going to go. I just wanted to jump right into the screen when this started. It was so fun to be in the theater watching this and just step into this strange world. And it just really, it's so gorgeous, and it just pulls you right in from the beginning.
How about you, Helen?
Well, I'm glad to hear how this movie opened because I walked in a couple minutes late. So I walked in when he's like, I know, I'm sorry. I walked in when he was like burping out his mouth. So does that happen like right after we see her on the bridge?
Within a few minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the day that I went to see this movie, I was in a bit of a funk. I really didn't feel like going out, like leaving my house. And I was hoping that this movie would pull me out of the funk that I was in. And so that was kind of where I was at when I plopped myself in the seat with my Subway sandwich. um, and so I walked in when he's at the table with Bella and he's like burping out his food and she's being a playful baby on the other end of the table. And I was like, okay, here we go. Let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, let's get into storytelling.
So a story is, of course, focused on the journey of the characters and the themes, and we'll get into all of that, but it exists in a place and a time. And when we think of the very, very best stories, the ones that have stood the test of time, and the people keep coming back to for reference or drawing on for inspiration, these great stories exist in a world that is very fully realized. And I think before we even get into the story of Bella Baxter, I just want to acknowledge what an absolute master of world building Yorgos Lanthimos is. And I think it's a big part of why we look forward so much to his films. Whether it's the house the siblings are trapped in Dogtooth, or the hotel in The Lobster, or 1700s England in The Favourite, he sets his stories in these richly detailed worlds, and it's just so utterly brilliant at transporting us, the audience, into those worlds. And Poor Things is no different. It's almost like an alternate reality of London and Lisbon and Paris. It's fantastical and bizarre, exaggerated, absurd, but it's so meticulous and like robustly brought to life that it doesn't matter what he puts in it, whether it's that animal hybrid that you mentioned in the opening, Helen, or Bella Baxter, it all feels so real. And I think that's a big part of why this film succeeds, because the world is so rich and complete, and because we accept a character like Bella in it. I just wanted to shout that out at the beginning, because I think that is key to the success of the storytelling in this film.
Yeah.
So this is based off a book by Scottish author Alistair Gray, and it's a postmodern revision of Frankenstein that, replaces Frankenstein's monster with Bella Baxter. I'd like to read this, but I feel like I'm happy that I didn't. It was really nice actually just going into this, not fully knowing what to expect. This is similar to the story of Frankenstein, which is one of my favorite novels of all time. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. It was written by Mary Shelley in 1818. And what I thought was interesting was how this took the story of Frankenstein and it flipped it. Frankenstein, even though it was written by a woman, that story is focused mainly on male characters. And this idea of a man wanting to push the limits of science and experimenting and asking these big questions, and men wanting to explore and seek out answers. And it also questions the idea of God and playing God, and God casting out his creation into this cruel world, and also very much a criticism of religion. And Poor Things, even though Bella's character is her creator is male, the story centers around her, a female wanting to explore the world, instead of it being, Victor Frankenstein's character that casts her out into the world just unwillingly. Bella goes out into the world by her own free will, and her want to explore and her need to explore, which is generally something that's given to a male character. Usually when you see a woman wanting to answer philosophical questions, it's because she's like gone through a divorce or something. Oh, she's gone through a divorce, and it's always attached to the oppression of women instead of just a woman being alive, you know, and wanting to explore. And I really, really appreciated that about this movie.
Yeah. This is my favorite feminist movie from 2023. I was honestly like dumbfounded by how beautiful and brilliant I thought this movie was. And, to speak to what you were just talking about, Sinclair, the book and the fact that it was written by a man, and, Yorgos directed this film and he's a man. I love how the autonomy of a woman is so championed in this movie. Really, when you look at the fundamental like motivations of her character and what she's going through, her journey, it's actually very simple. Like, it's just a person coming into their own and discovering the world, but it's built with such extravagance. Like, the execution is so extravagant and bizarre, and it really makes for like honestly like a masterpiece. Like, this movie like blew my socks off.
You know, sometimes films that are championing or some type of a perspective can feel preachy or irritatingly whatever. This is not that at all. It's so much smarter than that. Because you just see, though, through her eyes, the complete absurdity of the patriarchy.
Exactly. Yeah.
How absurd it is that she should have to deal with all these men who want to possess and control her. Like, she's just trying to live her life. And it's not pushy. It's not like lectury in any way. It just lays it out for you. And I think that is super, super effective. I want like all of the world's men to see this movie. Right.
And you can't argue it, which I think is so brilliant. Like, she's just saying the facts, you know? She's like, oh, you want to marry me? Okay, you can marry me, but I'm just going to go have fun with this person first. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, I'm just being honest.
Why would I keep something in my mouth that I find distasteful?
Find revolting. Yeah.
Sometimes you want to punch a baby, you know? I want to discuss the discovering of sexuality and how it's presented in this movie. Because, look, this could have gone really wrong. And it's gone really wrong, I think, in a lot of movies. This idea of a woman discovering her sexuality, having this naivete and, you know, this baby brain put into her body. This could become what is called the born sexy yesterday trope. You can YouTube that. There's really good video essays on that. You get that character in The Fifth Element. You get that character in Splash. It is a very sexual woman with a childlike attitude and brain and a naivete, and she's being guided by a man. This movie didn't do that at all. This is one of those movies that somehow did it right, and it was really refreshing. This never feels creepy. It never feels fetishy, and it is because the writing of her character is so good. She is not that character from Splash or The Fifth Element. She is assertive, and even though she doesn't know everything about the world yet, she has so much agency. She seems to always hold the upper hand in most of this, and you see her being in the driver's seat for this film. Exactly. And, you know, standing up for herself. And it also is funny. It is genuinely funny, and it never veers into creepy.
No, not at all. Well, and it's interesting what you said in those comparisons, Sinclair, that she's being guided by a man. And what is different here is that she's not being guided by a man. She's being guided by herself. She has the power throughout this entire movie. You know, Mark Ruffalo's character wants to control her, wants to be in charge of her, and yet she controls him in the end. And unwilling, it makes unintentionally.
These male characters mad, like turn into complete puddles.
Yeah,
because they can't control this woman, and it's fascinating. Like that, Mark Ruffalo's character is so perfect because you just see this unraveling. If he's like, how do I even have an identity if it's not like, who even am I if I can't control this woman?
Yeah, and to speak more on, you know, the sex in this movie, I love the way that sex work is portrayed as well. It doesn't, it's not judging sex work at all. It's just her saying like, oh, this is a way that I can make money. Okay, sure, I'm going to do it. And then, you know, she has her criticisms of it. She says like, well, why shouldn't we pick? Because wouldn't it be better if we're picking you and then you know that we like it, right?
She calls it her whoring, my whoring.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, just, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's not like looking through a rose-colored lens at that world. It's just all presenting it as a thing, an experience that is without judgment. I think that is this whole film really is like in terms of her.
Yeah.
And it really just looks at sex as a part of life
Yeah.
that you can enjoy. And there doesn't need to be any judgment around that. Like, I was watching this thinking, can we like play this in like sex ed classes in high school? Like,
honestly, me too. And it's funny because I saw an interview with Emma Stone. We'll talk about performances in a bit, but where she said like there was so much to unlearn when working for this character about shame around sex and around all of that, and that's what a big part of why it's her favorite character she's ever played. And I thought, yeah, of course, if you're in the mind of Bella Baxter for all of this time, you are going to have to feel some type of sexual liberation. Like, it's kind of simple. It's just like sex is like fun. Like, why can't we just like do it and enjoy it? It doesn't have to be such a thing.
Well, that line is so great when she says, why don't people do this all the time? Yeah. And yeah, it's like, of course, why? It's fun and this, but it's honestly even so much more than that too. It's like, coming from a woman, it's like, oh, because you experience so much shame. Women have experienced so much slut shaming and all of that. And oh, because there's so much, societal criticism of you. That's why. That's what makes that line so good and hit home. For a lot of people.
Yeah. And she comes up against that polite society, quote unquote. Like, that is the reason for why she needs to tone herself down, or she can't say this and she can't do that. And it really makes you question it, like we have been so dulled, I think, in a lot of aspects of life because it's not the way you're supposed to behave. And just watching her go through the world in this movie, it changes your perspective. Like,
well, she's going through the world like a man in a lot of this movie too. The assertion, the no shame, sleeping around. Like, she's going through the world similar
with
to
the freedom that the world has given men.
Yeah.
And she's learning by doing. She's not learning by being told.
Yeah.
Like, Duncan tells her she can only eat one tart, and then she goes out on her own, she eats a bunch, and then she throws up, Like, okay, maybe that's too much, right?
Well,
but she's learning on her own.
That I love too. Like, you mentioned it in the question that you asked in the opening there, Helen, where it's like, yeah, she's learning about the world, and it's like, I like this journey because at the beginning she's just id. Like, she's pure chaos, learning, figuring it out. It's all based on instinct. But I do love that by the end, she's learned that, like, true liberation isn't existing just as, like, an operation, like, going through the world purely on instinct. It is about finding a way to carve out your own place within society while still being a part of that society. Yeah. There are some societal norms and conventions that have merit and can contribute to your sense of liberation.
And making meaning of the ups and downs,
Yeah, I love when she gets stuck in her nihilistic phase.
Yeah, that was great.
But only because I knew that she would come out of it in some way. But because I was like, oh no, this can't be. You know me, but yeah.
Okay, let's get into the performances in this film. Emma Stone is a revelation.
Oh my God.
This is like a masterclass in acting. Again, like, I want to show this in sex ed classes and I want to show this in like acting classes because it's so fully embodied.
Yeah.
And she goes from, 0 to 100 and then back somewhere in the middle in this movie. It is everything, and it is entirely believable.
This film asks so much of her performance, from the physicality, from the way that she walks. Every single like sequence, there's like a slight evolution in how this character is, which is wild when you take into consideration that this would not have been filmed chronologically, and it's like she had to always be present in that exact moment with that unique iteration of Bella. This is an egoless performance. It's the most courageous, incredible, fearless performance. I don't know how she doesn't win an Oscar for this. She has to. She won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy. Lily Gladstone won for Best Actress in a Drama for Killers of the Flower Moon. I adored Lily in that film, but there's just no comparison here. Like, this performance is one for the ages. I think Emma Stone she is going to have a really long, successful career. And I think in the far future, when people are start doing retrospectives on her work, this is going to be one of her most celebrated and beloved roles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is it. This is the performance of the year. It's just hands down. At the Globes, when they announced that category and everyone else in that category, I thought there's just no competition. It's Emma Stone. Nothing compares to this year at all. It's comedy, it's horror, it's drama, it's absurdist. She carries this film. This is the lead performance. This is it. There's transformation. There's physicality. I honestly don't know who else could have done this. I mean, maybe Helena Bonham Carter in the 90s, but she does not have the sense of humor of Emma Stone in the same way. Jennifer Lawrence, I don't think, would have brought the same level of gravity. I don't think she's she's a great actress, not as highly skilled as Emma Stone, I don't think. This is it. I don't know who else would have done this.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was incredible. Also, Mark Ruffalo, I'm so used to seeing him in this box of likable Hulk guy. This is the MCU thing and the romantic comedies. It's been a long time since we've seen him in those films where he was given really complex roles. It was really refreshing to see him stretch, and he's talked about it in interviews too, about how excited and scared he was to break out of that mold that Hollywood has kind of put him in these past few years. It's an unhinged, super freeing, it must have been so fun for him to do this performance.
I read a quote where he said this performance was, it's one foot on a banana peel and the other in a grave.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think Marvel really derailed him for a while, because when you go back into his early career, there are really meaty roles. I recently rewatched In the Cut, and he is very, very sexual in that. And, watching that along with Poor Things around the same time, he plays characters with a lot of sexual prowess. And is incredible at it, and I'm so happy to see him doing something daring again and messy. It's so nice.
Willem Dafoe is incredible as always in the role of Godwin, a heavily disfigured scientist whose father did horrible experiments on him, but has an acceptance about it, and he is lovable, even though
it's so weird.
Yeah, even though he is monstrous in this movie, but he is lovable.
Well, he plays the opposite of the Victor Frankenstein character. He's playing this. It's really interesting because he is a combination of, I think, Victor Frankenstein and also Dr. Moreau from The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is another one of my favorite novels. This movie has it all. Truly. And he's this empathetic version of those two classic characters, and he shows a lot more compassion and a lot more empathy. And the interesting thing is that he has been he's the experimenter, but he has also been the subject.
Yeah.
And he is kind of playing the role of the scientist and the monster at the same time. It was a wonderful combination. And I think that kind of gives him the motivation to be empathetic towards his subjects.
And he does let her go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which says something, right? Quick shout out to Catherine Hunter as the madam in the brothel, who we loved a couple years ago in Macbeth.
Yeah.
So cool.
She's wonderful.
That voice,
I know.
and just her face and her physicality, I love it, and I love her in that brothel outfit.
I know.
It's just so fun.
Yeah.
In terms of technical, come on visuals, the camera work in this movie is next level. I don't know how a world exists where this doesn't win Best Cinematography at the Oscars. It's the most creatively shot film I've seen this year. There's this voyeuristic camera technique through the whole thing where it's like when you're in an apartment and somebody who knocks at the door and there's that weird little glass lens in the door,
like
that
a
you look
fisheye
through.
lens. Yeah,
That's everywhere in this, and it adds to this feeling of like discombobulation, and these crazy wide lens shots where it's like everything on the sides sort of gets stretched. There's so many peculiar and original like angles. I just can't say enough about it.
well, and the sets, like the world building in this, which you mentioned off the top, it's just so, like I said in the intro, it is pure imagination. This is imagination of the world, like, because it is still, we're seeing the real world, but it is skewed, and it's from this I actually wrote down that it felt like an adult Roald Dahl novel without even thinking about it being in relation to Wonka. And they filmed most of this on a soundstage. They used some miniatures at times, but they really built out like all the sets, like the ship and Lisbon and Paris, and they were also intentionally making a lot of the sets look like genitalia.
Oh yeah.
And so that was
there's
really
that
built
pink
into a lot of
ceiling,
it.
Yeah. The set design in this is so good. It's exactly what I needed and wanted. It's what I didn't get in Wonka, where it was just all CGI. This is this is a timeless style of film. Movies that inspired this were films by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. One film is Black Narcissus, which is an incredible film. So many painted backdrops. I've talked about one of their films before on the podcast, The Red Shoes, when we did dance movies and the painted backdrops. This really pulled from that, these gorgeous painted sets. His lab is also really interesting because normally you think of a scientist's lab, they're very dark, kind of menacing. They're in a dark cellar. This is in a bright open space. Edison, you probably loved all the light in this film. One thing I want to mention about the world building is that this is retro futurism. And I watched this and I was like, this feels steampunk, but not. And the reason for that is, and I think I got this down, the difference is that retro futurism is set in an early time, but using things that are imagined in the future, that come later in the future. Where steampunk is in the future, but it's using old industrial machinery. And so that's like the distinction between the two. And that's why when you watch it, you're like, this feels steampunk, but not quite. There is a difference that's happening here in this world. Yeah.
So cool. And we can't finish up on technical without just mentioning the score, which was so unusual and original. But imagine like listening to it of its own. It's so abrasive and like abrupt and screechy at times, but I mean truly adds to this film for sure.
Yeah, the composer was Jerskin Fendrix.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the last word on Poor Things, Helen?
Well, I was in a funk going into this movie, and I will say that it changed me. I felt different when I left. I felt hopeful. I felt like I wanted to make art. And, you know, I mentioned this last week in our most anticipated episode that when we saw Beau is Afraid, I said, okay, men aren't allowed to make movies for a while. And Yorgos Lanthimos has brought at least himself out of grounding. He can make as many fucking movies as he wants. You have redeemed male filmmakers, at least for a while.
I believe it's called Furious Jumping, Helen, not fucking.
Yeah, that's my last word. Edison?
Yeah, for me, this film, like I had high expectations, really high going into it. They were met and surpassed. It's my favorite film of the year so far, easily. I love how it was like screechingly hilarious, and at times in a like ha ha ha, like laughing way, and at times in a like, what the fuck am I looking
Yeah.
at way. This performance from Stone is untouched. It's truly remarkable. The way that this film looks, the originality, the like, literally everything about it. I just was obsessed. I loved. How about you, Sinclair?
Yeah, I needed this film. Also my favorite film of the year so far. This has everything all rolled into one movie. Poor Things is one of those movies that gives me hope for the future of cinema, makes me believe again in the power of cinema. And it's just so thought-provoking. It's wild. It's weird. Go see this. Don't bring your kids. Or maybe bring your kids. I don't know.
Bring back
leave their asses at
dramatic
home.
films
Take them
for
to
kids.
Wonka. You know what? This one's for the freaks, baby.
Yes.
Well, this has been a very special double feature episode of Talk Movie to Me. If you would like to get in touch with us, our email is talkmovietome@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at talkmovietome. Rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And season 7's episodes are available on YouTube. Talk Movie to Me podcast. I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
And I am Edison. If you please. No, I'm sorry.